think it's only fitting that I follow that splash of cold water that only Sam Dixon can deliver. But long live the God Emperor. I don't think I'm alone in thinking how surreal all this is. Of course, those of us on the alt-right always took President-elect Donald Trump and his chances seriously. Unlike everyone else, we weren't surprised, or at least not that surprised. We knew he could win. Many of us thought all along that he could win. The mainstream media, or perhaps we should refer to them in the original German, Lügenpresse. The mainstream media never did. This was the year when random shitlords on Twitter, anonymous podcast hosts, and dissidents working deep within the Beltway right proved that they objectively understood politics better than the Republican strategist and political consultants snarking at us every night on MSNBC. It's not just that they are leftist and cucks. It's not just that many are genuinely stupid. Indeed, one wonders if these people are people at all. Or instead soulless Gollum, animated by some dark power to repeat whatever talking point John Oliver stated the night before. But even though we always took Trump seriously, there was still a moment of unreality, or perhaps a reality that was too painfully intense, when the state of Pennsylvania was called for Donald J. Trump. It was that moment when we knew Keck had smiled upon us and that magic was real. And though we might use these terms half-jokingly, they represent something truly important, the victory of will. We willed Donald Trump into office. We made this dream our reality. And if we will it, it is no dream. A quote I'm sure our friends at the Anti-Defamation League know very well. And this Trumpian dream was only the beginning. After all, what does it mean to bring your dreams into reality? Dreams are chaotic and hard to understand. They can be self-contradictory and confusing. But at some level, they represent our deepest yearning, our desire to live the impossible. As T. Lawrence wrote, "We aren't the dreamers of the night, whose dreams are mere vanity. We are the dreamers of the day, those who do not want our visions or even our fantasies to escape reality. We want them to be reality." In a culture which offers video games, endless entertainment, drugs, alcohol, porn, sports, and 1,000 other meaningless distractions to convince us of another reality, we want to cut all of that away. We demand to live in the world that we imagine. Today, there is an effort by the humiliated mainstream, those commissars who are lashing out against us and who are whipping up the mobs outside this very building to push back against us. Despite winning the election fairly, despite winning in the face of near unanimous opposition from the mainstream media, there is a concerted push to deny the new president-elect his fully earned legitimacy. It's especially amusing considering the indignant whining we heard only 2 weeks ago about how unconscionable it was that Donald Trump was supposedly going to refuse to accept the election results, and how he was going to unleash his supporters into the street. Really, who can take these people seriously ever again? In the latter part of the campaign, Peter Thiel, one of the few people of wealth and status who endorsed Trump, talked about America as a normal country. A country with a functional government, not constantly at war with the rest of the world. This was the promise of Trump to many of his supporters. And yet, for the cultural left and its propagandists in the media, their main argument that we have today is, if you can call it an argument, is that Trump should not be normalized. This, of course, begs a question. What is normal in 2016? In the current year, late-night comedians don't tell jokes, but give us lectures on what should never be laughed at. Worn-out celebrities like Madonna, who have based their entire lives on transforming themselves into clumsy symbols of sex and materialism, claim to be offended by the indecency of Donald Trump. Journalists don't fight for free speech, but lead the charge to restrict it. In the current year, the state wars against the nation rather than protecting it. And what is the state of the world? What is the status quo that our normal president, Barack Hussein Obama, the community organizer from Chicago, is now shilling for in his latest foreign tour? Let's look at what the government does. The bulk of the threats we face, especially the Islamic State or Muslim terrorists operating within our own societies, have been enabled by our own governments, if not quite invented by them. Massive armies, huge navies, terrifying weapons which could destroy the whole world over and are subsidized at ruinous cost, are actually used to further policies which make all of us less safe. In the Europe defended by American armies, refugees who commit horrific crimes are set free, but citizens who criticize them are arrested. Meanwhile, at home, the protection of the borders, the primary, and for some, the only national security responsibility of the government, is ignored. Indeed, Western governments go out of their way to seek out the most dysfunctional immigrants possible and relocate them at taxpayer expense. The non-government organizations who support this colonization effort are given huge amounts of money to make their own communities worse. Is this normal? Would the founding fathers who created the American ideals we hear so much about think this is okay? And let's look at the culture. In the current year, one's career can be ruined and one's life destroyed if you express anything other than admiration for a man who wants to cut off his genitals and say he's a woman. In the current year, we are told the great threat to our democracy is fake news. And then hear breathless accounts backed by little to no evidence that Breitbart.com is a white nationalist organ. In the current year, a white who takes pride in his ancestors' accomplishments is evil. But a white who refuses to accept guilt for his ancestors' sins is also evil, maybe even more so. In the current year, white families work their whole lives to send their children to universities where they will be told just how despicable they are. In the current year, the powerful lecture the powerless about how they don't recognize their privilege. In the current year, a wealthy Jewish celebrity bragging about the end of white men is the one speaking truth to power. In the current year, if you are physically strong, you are fragile. Black is beautiful, but whiteness is toxic. Government doesn't stop crime, but subsidizes it. White privilege is very real, but race is just a social construct. And if facts are too disturbing, you can always retreat into the safe space of box juice, teddy bears, and endless empathy where reality doesn't have to matter anymore. Today, neurotics and degenerates are presented to us as heroes. Beauty is openly denigrated as an offense against equality, and we are ruled by a government which, despite confiscating an outrageous amount of wealth, can't fulfill its basic responsibilities, defending a people and a territory. This is a basic bitch argument. But the pre-made signs of those leading the protest against Trump, probably some of those outside this very building, come from some of the most extreme communist groups in the country, the most murderous ideological force in history. It feels almost embarrassing to make this argument because we know no one will take it seriously. Yet this very day, breathless editorials screech that random internet comments on websites the mainstream media doesn't like mean Donald Trump shouldn't appoint this or that person to his staff. We need to remind ourselves of these things. None of this is natural. None of this is normal. This is sick, disgusting. This is a sick, disgusting society run by the corrupt, defended by hysterics, drunk on self-hatred and degeneracy. We invade the world and fanatically invite entire populations who despise us. We subsidize people and institutions who make our lives worse just by the sheer fact of their existence. We run up deficits and pretend the laws of history simply don't apply to us because of American exceptionalism. This cannot go on any longer, and it won't. At some level, we demand the impossible. Even those half-joking memes about Donald Trump as God Emperor or as the progenitor of some glorious imperium testify to that yearning for something more. Yes, we should insist on our dreams, on the conquest of space, on the development of revolutionary technology, for a humanity that is greater than we are today, for a race that travels forever on an upward path. But on another level, what we want is something normal, something almost prosaic, maybe even boring. Why is something as simple as starting a family, owning a home, and leaving a legacy to your children seen as an almost impossible dream for so many Americans? Why must there be two incomes for a family to simply break even? Why is it impossible to build a real civic society because the whim of a federal bureaucrat or a social justice warrior can impose Section 8 housing, refugee resettlement, or some other population transfer scheme deliberately designed to break apart functional white communities? Why do institutions of higher learning turn out graduates who are personally and emotionally broken, not to mention ignorant? Even those who can build something in this environment spend the money they earn to isolate themselves from all that vibrancy they feel the need to defend in public. It's not just that this society makes it impossible for us to collectively accomplish greatness. It's that collectively we can't even accomplish small things. We take for granted that our culture is filth, that the mass transit just won't work, that the cities are rotted out from within, that the great art and architecture of the West has essentially already all been made. We know that our country's best days are behind us. That was the Ur myth that animated the Trump campaign. To say, "Make America great again," is both radically pessimistic and boyishly optimistic all at the same time. It is an admission America is not great, that it is not what it once was, that it is no longer a nation capable of achieving what it once did. Even liberals at some level know this, as they occasionally pay wistful tributes to the early 1960s, America of the moon race and the middle-class lifestyle, while conveniently forgetting that American society was 90% European. Yet MAGA is also forward-looking. This idea that we can do this, that America can be what it was, that this idealized past can be restored. More than that it can reach new heights, be greater than ever before, as Donald Trump put it. We're going to win so much, we're going to get tired of it. This is the new normal. This is the new normal we're promised. An America of greatness, but also an America of functional communities and the possibilities of those little things, a satisfying life for ordinary people. Contrast MAGA, Make America Great Again, with Marco Rubio's slogan, "For a New American Century," literally cribbed from the neocon think tank that planned the Iraq War. Contrast this to Hillary Clinton's poll-tested "Stronger Together." What does that even mean? Her coalition was made up of mutually hostile tribes, only united out of a hatred of Whitey. That is to say, out of a hatred of us. In the last week of his campaign, Trump was hosting several rallies a day, including one near here in Northern Virginia. A friend of mine who was there told me that he was several hours late. That is Trump. But no one in the audience wanted to leave. And it became so late that small children, so there were many families at the rallies, started falling asleep. Parents actually put coats on the ground to form a kind of bed for the children to sleep in and surrounded them to guard the sleeping youngsters. There was this kind of effortless, high-trust society. An entire people awakening to their own existence and realizing not just that they exist and have an identity, but that they can be caring and they can be strong. Contrast that to the Hillary constituency. The black political machines and the guilt-ridden liberal suburbanites who work their entire lives to move away from them. The left-wing activists who think they are fighting the system by working for the federal government. The multinational CEOs and the Latinos they've imported to clean their houses. Stronger together. There are no two parts of this coalition who could ever be in the same room together for any length of time. And this contradiction goes to the heart of the left. The left couldn't decide this year whether America was already great or whether it was never great. Is America some noble, multiracial experiment that belongs to the entire world? Or is it the product of conquest and settlement by mean old racist Europeans? Is it a beacon of hope to the suffering masses of humanity, or an enemy to be destroyed? Because, as the outgoing president would say, let's be clear. Despite these supposedly egalitarian values, America was, until this past generation, a white country designed for ourselves and our posterity. It is our creation. It is our inheritance, and it belongs to us. In the words of Jon Stewart, sit down, this is not your nation. The alt-right is not just an alternative to the moribund conservative movement. That beltway direct mail scheme and shills for eternal values that seem to trail the left's values by 8 to 10 years. It's an alternative. It's a real alternative to the whole system of lies. What we are fighting for is a new normal, a moral consensus that we insist upon. And Donald Trump is a step forward, a step towards this new normal. But even he is deeply compromised by our society. Donald Trump warred against segregated establishments. He supports affirmative action, or more bluntly, state-sponsored discrimination against whites. He will be perhaps the most pro-Zionist president ever put in office, turning a blind eye to continued Jewish settlements in the Palestinian territories. He opposes the Iran nuclear deal, which we should admit wasn't actually that bad. He has, let us remember, left the door open for some kind of mass amnesty at a future date, talking about keeping the good ones in the country. The hysteria surrounding his election doesn't show that he is extreme, but it shows how unhinged the press and chattering classes have become. We are told of the massive rush of hate crimes against non-whites by evil racists emboldened by Trump's victory. Amazingly, these crimes have never been captured on video. That violence which does exist, seems to consist of direct physical attacks against Trump supporters. And even when this is captured on video, CNN political commentators and the former press secretary for Bernie Sanders can smirk, "Oh my goodness, poor white people." What we see is that the liberal hegemony that governs society will not permit any reform, even the kinds of moderate reforms that could salvage the whole system. The undercurrents of almost all press coverage in the days since Trump ascendancy is that white people should not be permitted to vote. What's more, the news should be censored to ensure that people are only given the correct viewpoints. Far from reflecting on why they lost, or even extending even a modicum of empathy towards European Americans, the press has clearly decided to double down and wage war against the legitimacy of Trump and the continued existence of white America. But they are really opening up the door for us. You can imagine, hypothetically, some situation where President Trump or whoever slaps some ramshackle America together as it limps along for a few decades, where the boot is lifted off the neck of white America just long enough to keep the whole thing going. Yet the left can't permit even that. Natural conservation, workers' rights, income inequality, mass transit, whatever stated values the left supports have been thrown out in order to pursue a remarkably crude and simplistic anti-white hatred that is behind it all. And even more than during the election itself, the mask has been ripped off since November 8th. SJWs always project, and the American left is driven by anti-white hatred, full stop. It has no other goals, no real aspirations, nothing to look to. It is a nullity, and we have nothing in common with these people. It is different for us. Race is real. But, in some sense, whiteness really is a social construct. Think of the concepts that are now designated problematic and associated with whiteness: power, strength, beauty, agency, accomplishment. Whites do, and other groups don't. In the banality of normal life and in our most outlandish dreams, in both our narrative and theirs, to be white is to be a striver, a crusader, an explorer, and a conqueror. We build, we produce, we go upward. And we recognize the central lie of American race relations. We don't exploit other groups. We don't gain anything from their presence. They need us and not the other way around. Whiteness, or rather identity, is being forced on the deracinated, consumerist last man that is European America. No one is going to be permitted to escape this process. Great historical changes are imminent when people are forced into a binary choice: fight or flee, join or die, resist or cuck. That is the position of white people right now. 2 weeks ago, I might have said the election of Donald Trump would actually lessen the pressure on white Americans. But today it is clear his election is only intensifying the storm of hatred and hysteria being directed against us. As Europeans, we are uniquely at the center of history. We are, as Hegel recognized, the embodiment of world history itself. No one will honor us for losing gracefully. No one mourns the great crimes committed against us. For us, it is conquer or die. This is a unique burden for the white man, that our fate is entirely in our hands. And it is appropriate because within us, within the very blood in our veins as children of the sun, lies the potential for greatness. That is the great struggle we are called to. We are not meant to live in shame and weakness and disgrace. We were not meant to beg for moral validation from some of the most despicable creatures to ever populate the planet. We were meant to overcome all of it, because that is natural and normal for us. Because for us as Europeans, it is only normal again when we are great again. Hail Trump! Hail our people! Hail victory! Pepe! All right. Well, I guess there's only one more thing to do, and I guess we should just all go get drunk, right? Thank you, everyone. It was profoundly meaningful to me that you were all here. Thank you. Let's keep this up. Look, it's great to celebrate, but the celebration is more sweeter when you know that this is just the beginning. So let's make it that. Thank you.